Hello, Melissa Crook here at the Field Podcast. We've got some ways to engage for you to consider today with our episode, Releasing Good Girl Syndrome with Kat Newport. What are some examples you've seen or experienced with good girl syndrome? Is this something you were aware of before listening to the episode, or is this new to you? I would be shocked, honestly, if this was new to you, but maybe it is. Become aware of situations like this in your life or in the lives of those around you. Supporting women in living unapologetically, starting with ourselves and those around us, not out of good girl syndrome expectations, but who we authentically are. We hope this gives you some things to think about today as you engage with today's episode, Releasing Good Girl Syndrome with Kat Newport. Thanks so much for being with us. Hello, and welcome back to the Field Podcast this week. I am here with a new friend that I met via our good friends at Podmatch. They always have such wonderful recommendations, and some of my best relationships and network that I've created in this work I do on the Field Podcast and Embracing Layers Network have been from our friends at Podmatch. So always thankful for them. But we're going to talk about and meet a woman today whose area of expertise could not be more important right now. It is a critical component of our relationships, of our workplaces, of our personal lives, all the spaces. And we're going to get into that today with our guest, Kat Newport. And you're going to understand what I'm talking about as we get into this. Kat describes herself as a compassionate leader. She balances kindness with accountability, ensuring people feel heard while driving results. She's fearlessly supportive. She stands up for others while fostering a culture of care and responsibility. She is purpose-driven. She leads with heart and conviction, making thoughtful decisions that benefit both individuals and the bigger picture. She's an empowered problem solver. She tackles challenges head on with empathy and strategic thinking. And she's grounded yet courageous, approaches situations with wisdom and emotional intelligence while taking bold action when needed. Ooh, I can't wait to jump into this. Kat Newport, welcome to the Field Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get right into it. We're going to start with self-care. Talk to me about prioritizing self-care in your life and what your journey has been with that.
So I've been in a corporate environment for most of my adult life. So back in the 90s, as I date myself,
I hear you. Me too.
Really, self-care wasn't really a thing. So, really looking at how that impacts your ability to engage with other people and how that negatively impacted, or my lack of self-care negatively impacted my ability to show up as an effective and empathetic leader. It sounds trite almost, you can't give from an empty tank. But that's essentially what it dropped down to. And I found as I matured in my career, taking that step back, taking that time out, finding those things that I enjoy and actually prioritizing them as opposed to working 90-hour weeks. Actually showed up in a whole different way in my career and in my personal life, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me about the kind of boundaries you learned you had to put around your time, your resources, when you're like, okay, I got to be done today because I got to go refresh and get the sleep and get the workout and get the walk, the nature, whatever it is, the time with family, the time with friends that I need to refill my cup. At one point, did you I've got to start doing this so I can actually show up as my healthiest, authentic self with a clear head and the ability to bring my best self to this place and to all my people?
Absolutely. So I think it came down to a bit of a health crisis for me, that it became that I was in constant and chronic pain. There was constant and chronic stress, which did wonderful things for my blood pressure.
Oh my gosh, I know.
So it really it came to a head. And of course, this goes along with that midlife crisis thing going, okay, do I want to keep going? midlife.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of keep going with that. And the answer was a firm no. I
Yeah.
cannot keep going like this. I've really got to change how I look at this. And it really did start to roll when I quite realized, looking backwards and again looking forwards, that the work never really stops. I got to get this project done, and it has to be done today, and it's got to be done now, 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 now. There's always something else right on the back end of that. There's always something else that
Mm-hmm.
needs to be done now. So it really became important to me to start prioritizing work. Does this have to be done today?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my stress was, I have to do it now. There was that alarm blaring in my head. It's got to happen today. It's got to happen now. People are relying on me. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And there
Yeah.
was a 5 alarm fire. And when I really had that moment to stop, when I really said, okay, this is a pivot moment. I'm getting sick. No, it's not really that big of an emergency. If I do it today or I do it tomorrow, is the world going to crumble? And the answer was no. If there was a hard deadline, you had to file a brief for the legal team, fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be done by
Yeah.
5. But not everything has that kind of deadline on it. It really doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And really stepping back and understanding that, and taking that space for yourself is super important. And I think that's one of the
Yeah.
biggest lessons I learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So much good stuff there, and which goes really nicely into taking care of our emotional health, mental health, physical health. You just gave examples of how your body was deteriorating physically from what you were putting it through with these hours, with these self imposed stressors and expectations. And I think so many times we do that. I got to prove myself. I got to show my worth. I got to show how valuable I am. I can't disappoint anybody. And so and we think we can just go and go and go. And that's not reality. We all have to stop at some point and refresh and refill. But we start seeing the physical ramifications of that. You mentioned the blood pressure, the body pain. So much of that manifestation is from mental and emotional stressors that we're experiencing.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've summed it up perfectly. I can add more to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you started experiencing that. At what point did you decide? Because part of doing this and setting the healthy boundaries and prioritizing your wellness requires effective communication. We are not mind readers. Other people cannot read our minds. But so many times we keep waiting for someone to see how we're suffering, how tired we are, how much we're giving, how much we're contributing. If we just keep going, 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 and we don't stop to ask questions or inform where we're actually at, people are going to assume we're fine most of the time. Most of the time, people are not going to, maybe a few close relationships will be like, you seem like you're burning the lamp at both ends a little bit. Maybe we should talk about that. But most of the time, it's upon us to communicate that. But when we've created this environment where we're available all the time, then all of a sudden we're scared. Like, what's going to happen when I start communicating? I need something different. What impact is this having on my relationships outside of work? Am I able to show up for them in a way that's needed? And what kind of underlying undertones of problems and conflict are arising there? It requires really clear, sometimes hard conversations. And so this has become really a calling card for you, something that you're very passionate about. So talk to me about your move into that, because to me, our next talking point is how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. Clear, concise communication is a number one calling card here. First, for showing up for yourself and encouraging and inviting other people into that and helping women know. We're talking about women. You help a lot, everybody, but we're talking about women here. In this case, we're afraid to speak up. We don't know our own value, that we deserve to have a voice in the room, that we deserve to be seen and heard, that it's not okay for us to be continually interrupted, what it looks like to be a woman in the room that's got a little more deposits in the bank, that you might be able to extend a hand And hey, I don't think Sarah was finished yet. Can we let her finish? She was in the middle of a good idea. Ways we can extend that. So, but this communication and not being afraid of conflict and knowing that having those conversations is actually going to minimize the conflict long term. When we decide I gotta take care of myself, I gotta bring this up, we gotta have this hard conversation, we're at a values impasse. And so I've said a lot there, but talk to me about this transition, because this to me is like your sweet spot of where you really show up unapologetically for yourself and for and encourage others as well and bring them along with you.
Absolutely. So there's so many things as you're talking, and the little lights are going off in my head. So I'm hoping I remember them all as we move through. So the first one I kind of want to address is the good girl syndrome. In so many cultures, particularly North America, particularly in Gen X and before, we were raised to be good girls. Put your own self on the back burner. Take care of everyone else. Don't make too much noise. They're there. Just be a good girl. And this is not only instilled in us in our core families, our nuclear families. It's within the culture.
Absolutely.
Famous figures saying, "Well, you're not a nice girl. You're not a nice woman." These things come out, and it just sort of sits there. So we have to identify and be able to identify when that programming is coming out, and it does. Which leads me into my second light bulb, which is boundaries. So everyone needs boundaries, and boundaries are scary. The first thing I often counsel and I often coach folks through is figuring out where they need boundaries. We say boundaries and people think, okay, these big walls where I'm going to block people out. And that's not the case. Boundaries are more like living hedges. They grow, they evolve, they need tending and trimming and, all of these things to, good fences make good neighbors to help with that. So when you're trying to think of boundaries and you're looking at when and where to set boundaries, figure out where you're getting a pinch, where you feel put upon. Oh, so-and-so did this and it makes me uncomfortable. This might be that little flag in the sand going, this might be a spot where we're going to just put up a little hedge. We're going to put up a boundary here because there's obviously something that I feel is impinging. Well, they always take advantage of me. Well, you're complicit in that. Why are they taking advantage of you? Why do they think that? Where's your boundary? How have you communicated that boundary? So pinch points and these flags along the way are points where you can start putting up those boundaries. And it's going to feel very uncomfortable in the beginning, particularly if you've been taught to be the good girl, to be the quiet one, to be complicit, to be, pliable to other people. A lot of us are people pleasers. A lot. We're a social creature. People pleasing keeps us safe, and to set a boundary, it's not a pleasing thing. It's also not a horrible, terrible, bash them over the head with your boundary kind of moment, but it is an uncomfortable moment where, I'm not really comfortable talking about this with you right now. Perhaps I'll come back to you later. It means I have to put the boundary in place. I see you're upset. I get that, but I don't have anything in the tank for you right now. And then standing by that, right? And you have to be able to be, and it's not the bad guy per se. You've got to be the one who's comfortable enough to put a brick onto the edge around your hedge, saying, no, I'm going to reinforce this a little bit, that I need some space. So those are the two big ones, that pre-programming from our families, the pre-program from the culture we're in, the fact that we're social creatures to begin with. So our base brain is saying, get along at all costs, or we're going to get, we're going to get eaten by a dinosaur. So there's so much going on. And then that identification of boundaries, the setting of boundaries, and then the maintenance of boundaries, which everybody seems to forget about. You have to maintain them. It's not up to the other person to memorize all your boundaries and exactly where they are. You're going to have to compassionately communicate those on a regular basis. Tuesday nights are my nights. I'm sorry, I can't work late. No, really. Tuesday nights, like I told you 3 weeks ago, can't do Tuesday nights. So yeah, those are the two ones that I wanted to bring up.
Well, those are really good. And I love what you said, so many good things there. And I want to go back to, we see ourselves as the bad guy. Really, we're self-advocating. This is a form of self-care. This is a form of self-preservation. This is a form of living out of our own expectations that we really want, that are really healthy for us, versus what we set beforehand because we were trying to live by somebody else's. We wanted to make sure they were satisfied with us, that we never disappointed them. This is really what taking care of yourself in a whole authentic way looks like. And so really kind of reframing the messaging on that, and the fact you've got to continue. It's the one thing to write them down and get excited and identify where they are, but then you got to communicate them. And the people that authentically care about you and are really in relationship with you, whether it's in work or outside of work, because they want you to be well and understand that you being well means you're better for yourself first and foremost because they care about you, and also you're better for them. You bring a clear-headed, clear-thinking, freshly rejuvenated mind and spirit to the workplace, to the work, to the space you're in, to the relationship. If people don't respond in a way, they just want to keep you the way you are, this might be a clue that it's time to think about a different space to be in. And that can be a really hard thing to do, but to honor yourself in that way. And when you haven't been doing this very long, it may take a few reminders. People may not get it the first time, and you've got to stay with that. And you can't take that. Sometimes we take people's pushback as a sign we've done something wrong. No, it's not a sign you've done something wrong. They're just not used to it yet. They just haven't been accustomed to you showing up this way, communicating this clearly, setting it out there. So you got to give them time. And at some point, you have to make a decision, I think, too, where you've reminded several times. This has been going on for 6 months now. They keep coming back to you. And I need you to really put this in your calendar, stick it in your mind, put it in a sticky note on your desk. I need you to quit asking me to violate a boundary that I've continually and clearly communicated with you, or we're going to have a different conversation about our relationship, our connection, our time, those kinds of things, and not being afraid to do that. But don't take it as a sign you're doing something wrong. New habits, your nervous system has to be trained that this new way is healthy for you, because I talk about this all the time on here, but and I just learned this 5 years ago through my own work and my own therapy, our nervous system equates safety with familiarity so many times. And so if all of a sudden we start showing up in this new way, it's going to take time for our nervous system to recalculate and re-equate. So don't misunderstand that discomfort as meaning you're doing something wrong as well. I think those are really important things that we've got to talk about when we're talking about this. When did you decide to move in this direction? When was your okay, it's time for me? And this really kind of goes into where the importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values and everything you do. At some point, your why, your values were pointing you, I have to believe, in this direction. So talk to me about that, okay, there's a need here, and for the betterment of us all, and boy, howdy, do we need to know how to have conversations and work through conflict right now more than any other time that I can imagine in our history. So talk to me about your move, the guidance of your listening to your inner knowing and your why and values and deciding this is the route I'm going to go.
So yeah, it was a very long journey. I was working at a leadership position, and one of the things that was on my docket was organizational development. So providing professional development to colleagues and sourcing programs and presenting programs. And one of the very first ones I was requested to present was conflict management. And it started out as a cute little 2-hour thing. This is okay. And then it went to a day. And then it went to 2 days. And then it went to 3 days. And it's like, oh
Wow.
boy. There's definitely something here just within this organization. And it was a customer service organization, forward facing organization, really on the ball in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So when I finally left that position and I was in a bit of a hiatus and I was taking time off to write my book, and I'm like, so I know I'm writing a book. This has been a lifelong dream. What am I going to write it about? And I want to get into coaching and I want to get into leadership. And, leadership is so broad.
It really is.
It really is. So how do I niche down? How do I listen to the heart song and follow the heart song? And, looking over my experience over the years, looking over what worked and, what sparked the passion. And I do refer to this often as my passion project. This is the passion. I really sat down and started thinking about conflict. Out of all the stuff that I have done, I've got the most feedback, touched the most lives, seen the most impact from managing conflict and supporting others and learning how to manage conflict. So that started, okay, how does this come out and how does this manifest? So becoming that conflict coach, working with individuals who are in estate planning, money and death and family. Where's the conflict there? Working with that and working in mediation and looking at that from an HR perspective as well, as I'm an HR manager, all of these different facets came out. I was like, okay, this is it. And to your point, it is so needed. And so many of us have never been taught how to do it, that it just seemed to click. And it's also, really based. Where there are two people, you are going to have conflict. Conflict is simply a difference of opinion. Your opinion versus my opinion. You like chocolate, I like vanilla. We now have a conflict, and the weight of that conflict will obviously differ. But that's kind of how it evolved, going, where is that niche? Where has the impact been in my life so far? And how do I pull that together and make this a bigger energy as I move forward in my career, in my life? So yeah, in a nutshell.
Yeah. Wow. But you said something so important. I mean, so many things so important there, but what really came to mind, and you and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording, was there's so much fear around it, but where there's knowledge creates a power and a confidence. So when we have knowledge, when we have resources, then it removes the fear and the ability. But for some reason, it sometimes takes a nudge for people to even ask for the resources and feel empowered in this space. And so how do you approach people when you're like, I think I can help you. This is how. And you see the fear. What are some examples that you use to remind them of this is actually going to remove that, not remove it completely. Sometimes conversations are just hard no matter how many tools you have, but it's going to give you resources to feel like you've got something to draw on going in.
So when working with clients who do start exhibiting that risk aversion, that anxiousness around those difficult conversations, around the potential conflicts, even the word conflict can cause anxiety in people. So you more difficult conversations, which in my mind is essentially the same thing, but whatever makes it work. So when approaching that anxiousness, it is really about sitting down and walking through that risk assessment. What do you actually think is going to happen here? And one of the examples I really love to use, and I came across it ages ago, and it just sort of keeps coming up, is, going to the family reunion and really not wanting to talk to grandma because grandma's going to bring up your weight. You really put on a couple pounds there, dear. She's going to bring up the weight. Here's a respected elder. Here's a woman that you love. Here's a topic you really don't like to talk about.
Yeah.
You really don't want to talk about the love handles or the hips or whatever it is. You don't want to do it. But what is the real risk here if you say, Grandma, why don't we just go play cards? I don't want to talk about this. I'm not comfortable here. What is the real risk there?
Yeah.
Well, she's going to stop loving me and the family's going to hate me. And, we all go to this catastrophic kind of thinking. She's going to die of a heart attack because they told her she can't talk about it. Well, okay. Let's walk that back a little bit. Granted, they're fears, not terribly logical, but they're fears, and they're there. So now that we've got worst case scenario in a box over here.
Yeah.
Poor grandma, because you tell her you don't want her to talk about your weight anymore. Let's be realistic.
Yeah.
What's going to actually happen? Well, she could get mad. Okay, what does that look like? And what does that mean? And how does that manifest? And really starting to unpack the fear and the assumptions around what's going on.
We treat thoughts and assumptions as truth rather than treating them as just thoughts and assumptions so many times.
Very much so. Very much so. It's very much like, no, I'm not going to send my food back. I know it's not what I ordered, but I'm not going to send it back because they're going to spit in my food. Okay. Sending it back because you wanted the chicken, not the steak.
Yeah.
It's the things that we kind of start to internalize. And this is where I come back to the messages that you're giving yourself and the messages that you're onboarding.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot, and I saw this with my own kids, and I see this a lot with some of my clients, that the messaging that you're ingesting, particularly from social media, is going to impact how you perceive reality. Well, if I say this, or, I get angry at somebody on the roads, they're going to smash my window open with a tire iron. Okay. This is what you're seeing on the TikTok. I get it. But it is not as likely as you're probably making it out to be.
Yeah. That's a really good example. I mean, what we ingest, what is in our subconscious, and what we start because those algorithms they just keep feeding you that you can go down a rabbit hole real quick, and all of a sudden you're scared to death of everything, or angry about something that maybe you should be a little angry about, but not to the level that you've gotten to, because the algorithm has just kept reeling. So bringing that people back to what's a more likely scenario? Let's break this down into what could actually be. And that in itself removes fear, because you're like, that truth, that thought, we're not going to treat, or that thought, that fear, we're not going to treat that as truth. I'm not going to tell you it's not absolutely impossible, but what do we think is going to actually happen here? Yeah. And that's really kind of a basic premise, but I think we overlook that.
Very much so. And it's also, and I love your point about the nervous system. It's about training the nervous system to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Yeah. So when we're looking at boundaries and we're looking at having those difficult conversations, conflicts, we're looking at having those moments. It's about starting small where the risk is small. It's about sending the chicken back when you ordered the steak. Because what's the risk of ever seeing that waiter again? Probably not a lot. What is going to happen to your relationship with the waiter? Probably not a lot. I've known him for 6 minutes. Versus starting out with your boss, you're a loser and didn't give me a raise. There's two levels here. Yeah. So instead of taking the nervous system and jumping full into the shock, which works for some folks, I'm not gonna negate it. I'm once I get over the original fear, I'm a cannonball kind of girl. Yeah. Some folks need that gradual buildup. So we start with the waiter, and then we go to the library where you see that librarian on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, and you're really not happy and you want to talk about something, the parking in the front, whatever. And then bring it up to eventually you get to grandma, and eventually then, oh gosh, we got to mom. And now we're going to go to the boss and ask for that raise, with the risk associated with it. Because risk is based on so many things, what you're asking for, the relationship involved, the type of relationship, and the depth of the relationship. If you've never really been close to your mother, confronting your mother and having that difficult conversation might not be as impactful as someone who has been very close and has an intramesh relationship with that parent. So it's very individual. So I find a lot of times folks coming to me and going, so what's the silver bullet? And my very unsatisfying answer is there isn't one.
Yes, we got to do the work.
What is your bullets? Because this is all about you, because we're all individuals. We all have pre-programming. Even when I work with families, for example, when we're doing the coaching, I have two sisters that are like 16, 18 months apart. They were raised in the same home by the same parents and have two totally different perspectives on life. They have two
Yes.
totally different perspectives on how they were raised. They have two totally different relationships with the same parent in the same household, separated by only 18 months. So yeah, there is no silver bullet.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
that's such
all
a good example, because no one's no one's lived experience is less true than the other, even though it's very different. And so creating space for everybody to be heard, seen, and known, even when your story and their story aren't in alignment, doesn't minimize. And that's really the first step in being able to have a meaningful conversation with each other, is just that understanding, that empathy, listening. I mean, gosh, listening is such a big component of this. And I say that because I am not always the best listener in conflict. I'm ready to fight. I'm ready with the next comeback. Because I grew up in an environment where that was very much the case. So I've had to learn how to show up at a level set in these situations. I've had to learn to say, I'm feeling more emotionally charged than I think is good for this conversation right now. So can we table this for 24 hours, 30 minutes, a week, and come back to it? Because so many times what happens with that is it's swept under the rug and it's never visited again. And it creeps up later into a bigger, badder problem. But tabling that and committing to a time to come back to it. But it starts with that seeing each other and stories with empathy and understanding, and not just dismissing the truth in their own story just because it's different from yours.
Very much so. There's got to be an openness to build on your thought. There's got to be an openness to accept the other person's perception as reality and incorporate that into your own.
Yeah.
Just because you have different perspectives about a certain situation doesn't mean the other person is wrong and you are right. If you're walking into a difficult conversation or a conflict with a win-lose mentality, you've already lost. There is no way this is going to end well at all. I've been in mediations and we were there for, oh golly, we had about 8 hours total together, split up over difference. And it was this dichotomy between one individual and another individual. Well, you did this. Well, that's not what I did. I actually did this. No. I'm sure you did the A. No. What I was meaning to do was B. No. What you did was A. And we spent 8 hours with both of them so entrenched that even taking each other's perspectives and they were so entrenched in the A versus B that you're wrong, I'm right. This is not going to end until you agree with me. The mediation was unsuccessful.
Yeah.
It just at 8 hours, we called it saying, okay, this is not going anywhere. I don't feel like I'm helping. I don't know if you feel like I'm helping, but we do have to stop.
Yeah.
So really being open to changing your step, to change your perspective. And this works not only in families as well, but at work, that no, my department needs A. No, my department needs B. It's like, okay, well, if we both need something, we got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so often it becomes, getting troops into your camp going, okay, we're going to do A because that's our department. And I'm going to talk to the boss over there. And then the other person is gathering their troops. And the next thing we know, we're in our trenches on the opposite sides of the battlefield, one wanting A and one wanting B. And this is not good for an organization. From a strategic perspective, this is suicide. Not going to happen. And it requires that ability to be emotionally intelligent enough to say, okay, for the better good of the organization, we have to bring A and B together and figure out what C looks like.
Yeah.
And that's terribly hard.
Yeah. But you have to I think you hit something so important. You have to decide going into this what your end goal is. If your end goal is winning, then you need to turn back out and go back out the door and get to a different space where your end goal is, where can we come to some kind of resolution that, we may both have to give up some things, but we both are better off as a whole in the relationship, in the organization, in the family dynamic, whatever it is. And if both parties aren't willing to accept that part of the deal, or there's just some non-negotiables that, then you're not going to get anywhere. You've got to be part of it. You can't expect someone to come in with your skill set, and just have that silver bullet again that we talk about. This is joy. And sometimes there's things we all need to have our non-negotiables. And at that point, it might be decided, maybe it's time for this relationship to take a back seat. Maybe I need to love you from afar for a while. Maybe it's time for us to dissolve and do something different. That can be true. And sometimes that can be what needs to be done. But if you're going into that again with that I gotta win mentality, then probably not going to get very far.
Agreed. And one of the things I see, and you see this on the TikTok a lot, because I do the conflict thing, and I see it on the TikTok a lot, that you didn't agree with me, so I'm just going to cut her out.
Oh boy.
If your go-to in conflict is, if we don't reach a resolution, you're out of my life forever, that's your first go-to, you're going to end up very lonely.
Yeah.
While it's always on the table and it's always an option, depending on the relationship, depending on all sorts of factors, we can go that way. But what do you really want? And this is where I bring the tool in called the Oculus OWL. It's a quick little acronym, also known as empathetic assertion. Three letters to make who. So think of the owl, think of who. And before you step into a room for a difficult conversation, the W is what. Without emotion, without the boiling water, what exactly is it that the concern is?
Yeah.
And you would be surprised how difficult that is. When you sit down saying, I'm going to go talk to this person, and I really have to articulate without emotion, without saying they're crazy, this is all their fault, really identifying dispassionately what the concern is. H in the who stands for how. How do you want to see it resolved in an ideal world? I would prefer you to come to me instead of talking to the boss, so we can potentially find a resolution together. Okay? Yeah. I have concerns when the boss comes to me about a question I've asked you. I would prefer that we work together on a solution. So can we set up a call before it goes to the boss so that we can potentially come to a solution? And then the O is opening yourself up to the relationship and negotiation. What do you think about that? I don't want it to go to the boss. This is a concern for me right out of the gate. I want some time to talk about it together before we go to the boss. What do you think about my idea? Instead of, you're always crawling around behind my back and running to the boss and every little thing, that's stupid, you're going to stop. I'm saying the same thing.
Yeah, yes. Yes, the delivery and the words matter.
Very much so. And it's getting yourself beyond the and into the Oculus OWL, into the dispassionate what's going on, into the objective, this is how I would like to see it resolved. And then opening yourself up to negotiation because you, Melissa, might have a different option. It's like, well, they have to be kept abreast. I agree. So let's copy them on the meeting as an optional attendant. What do you think about that? And there's that negotiation. I want A, you want B, and we're finding something in the middle.
Yeah.
Without compromising either one of us for our non-negotiables.
Yeah.
But it's the dispassion and working through those emotions yourself, because quite honestly, your emotions are your problem. I have my own to deal with. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're coming to me with a conflict, expecting me to make you feel better, you're going to be disappointed. Because the last time I checked, not a human alive had a magic wand to make you feel anything.
Yeah.
I cannot make you feel happy. I cannot make you feel sad. I cannot make you feel anything.
And I'm not responsible to.
No. These are your choices. As much as an unpopular decision and to comment that is, your choice to be angry is precisely that, your choice. The guy cuts you off in traffic. It is your choice to lay on the horn, tailgate them, and make rude gestures. That is your choice. Nobody's forcing you to do that. Mm-hmm. But they got it. Yes, it is very frustrating. Yes, they almost Yes, you were scared. But you chose to get upset.
Yeah. And respond in that way.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And when I'm in these coaching relationships, a lot of time that taking responsibility for your own emotional reaction takes a lot of work. A lot of times we haven't been taught to do that. They make me so angry. They made you angry. Well, they're a very powerful person.
You gave your power away, and getting into that why. What is in your story that is igniting this? What is the why behind it? Is it actually them, or what does this light up in you that this is based in from whatever scenario, whatever situation, time in your life? And I've had to really work on this, that getting curious rather than judgmental. Getting but it requires a really like pause and think through, because I'm a very emotional person, and ask anybody that knows me, I can be very reactionary and get very fired up about things I'm very passionate about. So this is something I have to be mindful of all of the time. And I had to even learn that kind of response, well, may have some justification in the core of it, is not going to move the needle necessarily on something. And what's a better, more well thought out, well planned way, and healthier as well, for me to really get to where I'm going, and consider, I think you hit on something so important, that our emotions, the way we feel, how we show up in the world, taking care of those things is on us to do our own work and ask those hard questions and get curious about the sources and heal those places that need to be healed, so we can show up present and as objective as possible when these conflicts come up. So yeah, going back to that silver bullet, sorry folks, it's a whole layered process that we have to go into.
Very much so. When you were speaking, what clicked for me was a client I was working with in a leadership coaching, and they had this horrible conflict going on with their boss. I hate them. They're terrible. It's awful. Every time they talk to me, I lose my mind. It's just, and it's like, okay, so what's the what? What's the W here? What are you upset about in this instance? Well, it's just that.
Yeah.
But where's the emotion coming from? Well, she says it just like my mother did. Back up the bus. Your boss is not your mom. So what do you think your boss's motivation is for saying this? Well, they're just trying to do that. Okay. So your boss's motivation is this. This is what's bothering you. How do you want it to come? So we were able to identify and start to separate a little bit that emotional reaction, because they use a similar phrasing and tone as someone in their past, and how we're going to move forward with that, knowing that the intent may not be the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and focusing forward, because so many times I get caught with my clients, and we're stuck. Well, it's just, okay, can we forward face, please? I appreciate the backward facing, but you came to me for a leadership problem. You want to be a better leader. So how are you going to do that? You want to get better at conflict so you can progress and get that promotion you want. How are you going to do that? And looking backwards, saying, well, this happened to me in my past, and this is why I react the way I do, and you're just going to have to deal with it, is not helpful.
No. And it just keeps you going on the same trajectory instead of being, and like, we can't assume everybody's going to, but it tells you how much that imprints on us. And when something like that imprints on us and continues to come up, we have to go back and heal that wound, or open that door, acknowledge that emotion, and figure out what we need to do, so that every time we have a situation come up like that many times these things come up over and over and over again in the world, we're not attaching that past situation to this current one all the time, because then we're just going to stay stuck.
Very much so. And that's the defining moment between coaching and counseling. As a coach, I'm very forward focused. I want you to get that promotion. I want you to heal that rift with your family. I am forward focused. If you start turning back around and wanting to deal with whatever issues happen back there, that's your counselor. That's your therapist. That's your psychiatrist. And now we have a multifaceted approach. You go to the right professional for the right thing.
Oh, I love that delineation. That was really good and really important. And I think important for people to understand when they are looking for guidance, direction, insights, resources, to really be fully thinking, what it is am I looking for?
And is that a reasonable ask from this particular person? Or do I need to bring in other people in other parts of my life so that this can actually be successful? Yes, I still need this. So thank you for that. That was really good.
Thank you.
And this really, we've been talking about this the whole time, really, especially the last few minutes, but living out of your own expectations versus others. We run into people all the time. You had to come to that point where it's like living out of what I've decided the workplace and these places expect of me is not serving me anymore. That good girl script is not serving me anymore. And we all have to get to a place where, and some people don't. I mean, sadly, some people don't get there and they continue to suffer because they think they don't have a choice. They think they don't see a way out, or they're not willing, they're comfortable. And I always say comfort can be the enemy of curiosity and health. So I'm not talking about comfort of having electricity and running water and those kind and food. I'm talking about comfort in your social situations, your work situations. Are you thriving? You and I both, we do work that lights us up, that makes us want to get up in the morning, that inspires us to have these conversations. Sometimes that's not possible for everybody in their workspace, but are you filling your cup and your place up with other things that light you up? Hobbies, activities that nourish you, those kinds of things. But you got to a point where you realized this was necessary. And so much of what you do is really helping people communicate their expectations instead of assuming that people just know, or they should know, or my expectations aren't as important as their expectations. You know, we give our power away. So talk to me about your own expectations journey and how that helps you in the work that you do today with people.
Very much so. So when I started my career, I very much fell into it. I started a part-time job that turned into a full-time job that, I started climbing up the ladder going, we're good.
This works.
All right. So it was more of a fall in, and I've encountered this also with so many clients over the ages over the years that
I know
we'll sit down, and I had to sit down, and I had to do it with myself. I actually had a mentor who sat down and asked me the same question. I find this a silver bullet. What are your goals? I have encountered so many professionals in my career that when we sit down to take a look at what is your next step, what are your goals? What do you want? You either get, I don't know, or the flip answer, I want your job. Like, okay, we need to flesh that out.
All right. Again, we're going to ask the question.
We got to go. Really, a lot of us get into these things. We become executives, become professionals, we become leaders. And is this what we want? Is this a conscious decision? Or are we following the next piece of flotsam and jetsam that sort of floats past the raft?
Yeah.
When articulating, what do you want to do with your life? People will sit and very much to your point, there's a comfort. Well, I'm in a job and I'm okay. Okay, you're in a job and you're okay, but are you happy? Well, what does happy mean? Well, what does happy mean to you? Because you came to me saying you're gaining weight and you're looking at potentially getting a new job. So what does happy mean to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really sitting down and being able to explore that. And I do challenge folks once a year, sit down, at least 5 points. What are your goals? What are your goals? And how have they changed since last year?
Yeah.
And why have they changed since last year? Do we have a new baby on the way? That'll change your goals right upside down. Yeah. All of a sudden, it goes from climbing the corporate ladder to being a present parent. It can change for every individual, but there are so many people I've come across, and it's just heartbreaking when I find it. What do you want to do? What are your life goals? And there's really nothing on the plate. There's parsley left on the edge, but there's no meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
And that'll stifle you. That causes mental stress. That causes a feeling of being stuck. Well, I'll just sit here until something gets better, or until something catastrophic happens. What happens if you downsize? What happens if you get, filtered out? You get your pink slip. What's going to happen then? And this is where it can become catastrophic for the individual who doesn't have goals, who doesn't have that next level set up, or at least a vague idea of what the next level looks like.
Yeah.
The most successful folks I found have that goal. I'm going to straighten up, I'm going to fly right, and I'm going to move up the ladder to the next level by doing X, Y, and Z. And lo and behold, we did it. It's like, okay, so are you happy now? Is this it? Well, no, I think I can do more. I think I can do better. I'm a fairly smart person. I've got the education behind me. What would happen maybe if I went to a different level of it? I don't know. Yeah. What do you want out of it? And lo and behold, the goals were set. And this individual went from entry-level position and is currently a vice president. It was about the goals and being open to the lessons and being open to the challenge and being open to be uncomfortable, being brave enough.
And that uncomfortable piece.
Yes. A huge difference between this individual and some others that I've worked with who I don't have goals. I'm okay where I am. Are you sure? Because you don't see me.
Yeah, I mean, because there is an air that people carry about them when they are comfortable versus satisfied. And those can look very different. And I love your piece about coming back and checking in with yourself every year. Are your goals the same? Have they changed? Are you looking to be more present for your family? Are your parents reaching years where you need to spend some more time with them? Care for them, figure that out? Are you wanting to travel more? Are you feeling the need to infuse more activities that nourish you, values that you have that you're not making enough space for to kind of, maybe you are where you want to be. You've made that VP role. You're happy in the job. You feel like you're meeting, but there's other areas of your life. I mean, just getting like, where is that why coming from? Is it coming from my own expectations and what I authentically care about? Is it being driven by something else? And parsing that out, because that will make a difference. I mean, I think so many of us, and I know this is the case for me, you get to 45, 50, 55, and you start assessing your life and whose expectations am I living out of? Whose why? Whose values? If I'm feeling angsty, that's telling me I need to ask myself these questions and really using these frameworks, this framework that I use on here, the framework that you're talking about. Start checking in with yourself, because we go through different seasons. It is unrealistic to think that everything's just going to stay static as we grow and evolve and change and just go through different seasons. Unexpected things are going to happen. And so, are you firmly rooted enough in your why, your value, your expectations, who you are as a person, that you can weather that storm, that unexpected storm? I mean, there's so many pieces, and that comes back to being able to communicate effectively. Once you know what those whys, those values, those things are, who do you need to communicate those to? First, communicate them to yourself, but who else needs to hear about this? Which really, I mean, that's such a key component of this.
And this comes nicely back around into where we've started the conversation, talking about boundaries and the difficult conversations that go with them. Because as your goals change, your boundaries need tending. Your boundaries will change. So you've got to move the bush a little bit. You've got to move the hedge just a little bit. And that ties into your goals, which is going to make setting that boundary easier, which is going to make having that conversation easier. If you don't know why you're setting a boundary and you don't know what your end goal is, it becomes very difficult because you don't have a firm footing in that motivation and in that value setting. And it does become hard and becomes much easier to waffle. It becomes much easier to say, I said it, and maybe not. They got mad. So.
Right. And going back to that, again, we have to, like, when we show up a little differently or things change, we got to keep communicating that. We got to get our system comfortable with that. We got to settle into that and stay committed to that. And also if you're coming from someone else's expectation or hope that where they want you to be, it's not going to stick either. It's got to be from you. And that might be part of the hard conversation is like, I understand this is important to you. And this comes up in relationships, your partners, your kids, your parents. But this is where I am on it. And I cannot effectively execute this in my life because this isn't what's authentically tied to me. And I understand that might disappoint you, but I need to not disappoint myself. So how do we get to a common place of being able to move forward in this space?
Mm-hmm. Because when we're having those difficult conversations, when we're having those conflicts, we're investing in the relationship. We're not breaking the relationship. If you avoid the conflict, if you avoid the difficult conversation, if you ignore it or you cut the individual off, the investment that goes into that relationship has ended.
Yeah.
And it will depreciate in value. That relationship will depreciate at that point. Yeah. So conflict, when we have it in our head that conflict is a bad thing, it's not. It's precious and it's valuable. And it shows that you're willing to commit to that relationship.
Yeah. And builds trust because you're both willing to show up and work through the difficult stuff. It means enough to both of you. Yeah, that's so good. All right. And we'll come back to that in a little bit in a minute. But talk to me about accepting the layered aspects of yourself. I think the ability to really feel good about yourself, feel good about your value, and communicate effectively on your own behalf. A lot of it is layered in, no pun intended, the ability to accept the layered aspects of yourself, the parts where you made decisions you wish you hadn't, you chose a job you wish you didn't, you stayed longer than you should have. Whatever the case may be, the surprise happened, you didn't respond the way you wanted to. You can't go back and change it, but it is a part of your story. And so instead of, trying to hide it or having shame around it, accepting it, that embodies and impacts how you feel about yourself, and also embodies and impacts your ability to communicate authentically and honestly and fully so that you can have the kind of relationship that is going to feel good to you and the person you're in relationship with. And this goes for relationships in your personal life as well as your work life. So talk to me about your layers journey.
So the layers journey for me sort of came down to 2 points, and I jotted them down as you were speaking. Sorry, I didn't forget. The first one is grace. There is not one human being alive who's ever done everything in their life absolutely perfectly the way it should have been done. And for those of you who don't see the camera, I'm using really big air quotes. Should have been done. Or I could have done better. I call it shoulding on yourself. Don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
Should have been better. Giving yourself the grace that I'm a flawed human being, just like everybody else. Things happened. I fixed them, whatever happened. The second piece was learning. What did I learn? As opposed to I should have, or I'm so bad, or I made such a mistake, I'm so stupid. What was my lesson? What is my takeaway from this event, or takeaways, depending on the event, that I'm going to try to put into my future experiences?
Yeah.
And really trying to take the lesson and the grace. Okay, I screwed it up, but I learned X, and I'm going to use X over there.
Yeah.
It's that forward facingness and not getting stuck into that feedback loop of I made a mistake, I made a mistake, I made a mistake, I made a mistake. Giving yourself the grace that, yep, you made a mistake, move on.
Yep. We all do.
Well, I'm so embarrassed. That's fair. Yeah. We're allowed to be embarrassed, and it doesn't last forever. Not unless you make it last forever. So giving yourself the grace to make the mistake And then once the mistake is made, to learn from the mistake. What are my carry forwards?
Yeah. Yeah. So important, because I think too, if you're in constant conflict with yourself on these things, it's going to be very difficult to work through conflict with other people because you're in constant conflict with yourself. Do you see a relationship between that when you're working with people?
Very much so. And this brings us back to the goals. What do you want out of life? I hate my job. Okay, so what do you want out of life?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I hate my girlfriend. Okay, so what do you want out of life?
Yeah.
It kind of comes back to the goals where we're stuck in this place, but we don't know where we're going. So there's that feeling of helplessness that starts to feed on it. Every human being I have ever met, and I'm sure every human being that you've ever met, is whole and complete and has the answers for their own life.
Yeah.
The job of a coach, the job of a mentor, the job of a friend is to help that individual realize their capacity. What did you learn? Give yourself the grace to let go, and then use those learnings in the future.
Yeah.
Only you can see what's going on in your life. And I encounter this so much with clients where, well, just tell me what to do. I can't tell you what to do because my life, my choices, my perspectives are exactly that, mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever I tell you is not going to fit. So let's talk about what you need, what you think, what tools you have, what resources you have, and how you're going to apply them.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. I love what you said about we all have it within us. We all have the tools. Sometimes you just need someone to help pull them out, ask the right questions, get you thinking about them. That's so good. All right. In Living Out Feel, which you do so well, finding empowerment, embracing layers, your journey has led you to this point. Talk to me in your own personal life, what that has done to for your relationship with yourself, as well as your relationship with other people, because these tools you use are work in both the workplace and in our relationships. So talk to me about that for you and the impact on you yourself.
So as the two, I used to be really, really bad at conflict. I just want to put that out there into the universe. I own it completely. I used to be really bad.
We work in the things that we need the most help on. I swear we do.
So really understanding that, okay, I really suck at this, and how am I going to move forward and how I'm going to make this better? And the more I learn that conflict is everywhere, conflict is happening all the time, even if you don't realize it, getting the wrong coffee from the barista, you're in conflict. It's happening all the time. And most of us deal with it without even thinking about it, without having that emotional hit. How do I make that happen? And so moving from a point of being frightened to talk to people, being frightened to say the wrong things, saying the wrong things because I finally got the courage to say, oh, no, that was bad. And moving from there, and it's definitely helped with the anxiousness and the stress and the blood pressure that kind of goes along with it. The more grace I had, the easier it was to engage in the conflict. The more I took the events as lessons learned, as opposed to punishments for myself, that I made a mistake and I'm being punished, the more lessons I took from it, the easier it was to iterate to the next level, which gained confidence, which brought me into a different career, which brought me to a point where a lifelong dream of writing a book actually became a reality, where I was willing to reach out and build the relationships for people to help me. Even though we had different ideas, my literary coach and I, we got into it. I'm not going to lie. Well, I don't like your idea, and you like that idea, but what do you think of? We were on it. And I still have a really excellent relationship with them. And it's not that the conflict broke the relationship. The conflict birthed a product. It birthed my passion project. And without that conflict, I don't think I would have gotten to where I needed to be. And again, that comes back to that. What are my lessons? What am I learning? Yes, I messed up that chapter. I'm giving myself the grace to go back and do it again.
Yeah.
Because it would have been so easy to put down the idea of writing a book so many times. But I'm going to have the conflict. It's not total garbage. I'm not being punished. I have the grace to fix it,
Yeah.
to move on to the next level.
I love how you talked about seeing it as punishments versus learnings and lessons. That's really a powerful switch, because when you can see it in that learnings and lessons versus punishments, you can start seeing choices. You can start feeling like you're not stuck. And that is a very important flip to switch in your mind in how you view that, and the power of the mind in that. On your relationship side, outside of workplaces and work projects, how have you seen this manifest itself in your relationships?
So from a personal level, definitely, when it was let's avoid conflict, let's do this, I'm pretty sure that led to my first divorce. I'm not gonna lie. One of many things that led to the first divorce.
Sure, but no, that's a big component of a relationship.
Oh, very much so. And we did not fight well. We did not have conflict well. Moving into the next relationship with, okay, everything's copacetic, we're just not going to fight at all, into, no, let's have these conflicts, to let's talk it out. As I've seen that evolution over 20 years, 25, oh my God, a very long time.
Yeah.
As I've seen that evolution in that relationship, it's led to, at least on my side, and I can't speak for them, but it's led to my ability to see them as a more complete, more autonomous human being than when I did when we first married. It's like, okay, so there's the partner. This is what, this is great. And this is them. And, the depth of understanding of another human being when I have the grace to accept I've made some mistakes, and willingness to learn and recognize and give the grace to them as well.
Yeah.
Okay, you're so great. We didn't show up quite right. How are we going to do this as we move forward? And being willing to put the effort into the grace. And I mean, every relationship has the hiccups, and man, have I had some hiccups. But sitting with it and being able to say, no, the grace, I'm gonna hold on to the grace. I could flush this relationship so easily, but I'm gonna hold on to the grace.
We're
gonna see if we can move through this. Made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I bet. You hear a lot when you're talking to people about communication, the importance of I statements when you're communicating what you're experiencing. Is that something that you see in your work as an important part of, instead of you did, you should have, you didn't, blah, 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 versus the way I'm experiencing this is X? Is that something that comes up when you're working with people?
Very much so. So even with just the language of how to do the Oculus out, how to do the who, I feel that, I think that, I saw that, I experienced, becomes a game changer. It takes the heat out of it. This also talks into agency. You made me so angry. You did that to me. I don't have control over my own life. We're in that victim stance. Life is happening to me.
Yeah.
Once we start moving towards more of the I statements, we end up being more of a participant in our own life, as opposed to having life happen to us. We're participating a little bit more. It's like, no, we're here. This is happening. I'm angry, but they didn't make me angry. The next step in agency is leading your own life. I am making the choice to do this. I made the choice to do this. So I see it as three levels, and I'm sure there's so many other models, but I see it as three levels, that victim of life, that participant in life, and then the leader of life. And we slide up and down this scale. There are some times where we're all going to sit down at the victim side going, why did this happen? And we're all going to slide back up and down, really depending. But the more you can sit in the participant to leader level, the less stress you're going to feel, because you'll feel more agency. You'll feel more empowered.
Yeah. And that leads to back to that emotional, mental, physical health piece we were talking about earlier. This all ties into that. So good. Oh my gosh. So many good resources today. We're getting ready to wrap up here. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
5 activities that nourish me. I'm a visual artist. So painting for sure. I do love a good drawing. Just slapping color down on something. So I'm one of those folks who love those adult coloring books. It just provides an outlet. I'm I am a camper. I live out by the mountains. In the summer, particularly, I live in Canada, so there's a lot of snow right now. I probably don't want to go in the mountains today.
Yeah. Probably. Can you get there?
I might, no, not today. So heading out into the woods, and living in the mountains, you've got a lot of dead spots. So, oh no, my phone doesn't work. What do I get? I'm unplugged. I am done. So definitely that. And forming that connection with my partner and feeding into that primary relationship. And I do have children, and making sure that I'm present for them. Understanding that there's more to life than the work piece. There's more to life than the passion project, and really connecting with that core foundation of my family.
Well, and honestly, what a great gift what you've learned about communication and those resources and skills are for your kids. And they might not understand it now. I've got 3 grown children. They eventually get there. But what a powerful tool for them to receive.
So I have children ranging in ages from 9 to 28. I oops.
Yeah.
9 to 28. So when I look at the 28-year-old and I look at the 26-year-old and I see how they manage conflict and I see how they communicate and I see how they interact, it's like, okay, I did okay.
Yeah.
My 9-year-old could join the UN tomorrow and leave them all in the dust. The negotiations, the emotional intelligence on that child. He is 9. When he gets to 16, I am in so much trouble. So much trouble.
It's like, I taught him too soon.
This child can negotiate. So just seeing the differences that even showing up as a parent and seeing how my ability to communicate, my ability to manage conflict has impacted subsequently my children's ability to do so. It sounds like I'm experimenting on my children. That's not the case. But just seeing that evolution.
But they pick up on what they see, I mean, if our words don't match our actions, then they wouldn't have picked up on that. So I wanted to bring that up because I think that's really powerful. And it's such an important skill for this generation. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer too, and I've got millennials and Gen Zs. I'm like, we might be okay because they are much better at listening, talking, and working through conflict than we are. Maybe we have some hope in the world. That's what I'm holding on to. So that's a really powerful piece of this. So thank you for sharing that. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Impassioned. Peaceful. Yes, those can coexist. Impassioned, peaceful, engaged, relaxed, and satisfied.
Really good. I like that. And I like how you pointed out that those can engage together because they really can, using many of the tools that we talked about today. Speaking of tools, tell people where they can find you, how they can follow you, get your book. All of this will be on our website, on our resources page at embracinglayers.com. So no worries, listeners. You'll have access to this, but I want to give Kat a chance to share that right now as well.
Absolutely. The best place to get in contact with me with all the other links to everything else is on my website at smartconflictbook.com. So smartconflictbook.com, all one word. You can find my LinkedIn on there. You can find I'm on Instagram. That was hard to learn. I can do this on Instagram. You can get my book on Amazon, Smart Conflict, Turning Disputes into Growth Opportunities. So that is out in the world as well. It contains a lot of the tools we've been talking about today. Talks about connecting past to present to future. It's got the Oculus Owl in there. So if you didn't have time to run it down or you're listening to the podcast in your car, you can find it all in there along with a lot of other things too.
Yeah, and your website's full of resources. You've got videos on there and statements from people you've worked with. There's a lot of great resources there. Kat, we could have talked all day about this. This is such an important component for people to have in their toolbox, understanding with, to feel like it's accessible to them and something that they can do well in the world that we live in today, in the way we engage with each other. So thank you for this work that you do. for trusting yourself to move and identify this niche, and for how you show up in the world, and for being here with me today and sharing these wonderful resources. People out there, if you're listening, if conflict is something that makes you quiver, go to these resources that Kat has and get it and think about your why behind it. Unpack whether your fears are based in truth or what's actually happening here. I think that it can be so helpful for us when we can engage in this in a healthy way. It creates healthy work environments. It creates healthy relationships, healthy neighborhoods, a healthy world. If we could all learn how to engage in this in an authentic, healthy, empathetic, respectful way. And Kat has great resources to help us do that. But thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate everything that you shared.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. It's been a great conversation.
You bet. All right, everybody, don't be afraid. Don't have to be afraid. Don't let this get in the way of living the life that you want to live, and communicating that to those around you. I think that has so much power in our ability to embrace our layers and live the authentic, healthy, well life we want to live. So think about that. Take these resources with you and have a great week.